हाय, दिस इज़ अनामिका दिशा फ्रॉम आईआईटी मंडी और मैं आज प्रोफेसर गणपति रामनाथन जी के साथ हूँ जो कि न्यूयॉर्क ट्रॉय से आए हैं एंड यहाँ हम माइंड ब्रेन कॉन्शियसनेस कॉन्फ्रेंस अटेंड कर रहे हैं एंड इस कॉन्फ्रेंस को अटेंड करते करते मेरे दिमाग में काफ़ी सवाल आए जो मैं प्रोफेसर से सॉल्व करना चाहती हूँ कि वो मुझे उसका आंसर दे. अभी तक आई हैव बीन एंजॉइंग हिज जोक्स एंड फन अ लॉट. ही इज़ एन एक्सपर्ट इन दैट. And चाहे he is on stage या off stage, he can't be deterred at all. So hi.
Hi, Namaste, how are you?
Namaste, I'm good. So मुझे बताइए कि इस तरह की कॉन्फ्रेंस में जब हम आते हैं, मैं अपना पर्सनल एक्सपीरियंस बता रही हूँ. आई हैव बीन लिसनिंग टू लॉट ऑफ पीपल जिनको संस्कृत का ज्ञान है, जो वेद पढ़ के आए हैं, जो हमारे एंशियंट टेक्स्ट की स्टडी कर रहे हैं. So when I ask them about the explanation and when I listen to the what they tell on the stage, कई बार ऐसा लगता है theoretically थोड़ी बहुत चीज़ें I can place it, but I'm not able to understand the whole thing and many people are not able to relate to the whole thing. So what do you think? We still have limited number of people who are studying Vedas and whatever they are interpreting, they are telling us. So what is the way ahead? Do we all have to learn Sanskrit in order to understand Vedas in the way that they are supposed to be understood?
It's a great question, actually. So there are many different questions
Yes.
in the way you have really posed this. So this is a technical conference. So by nature of conferences in academia, where research is presented, there are a lot of technicalities involved. And for a person who's not involved in research or don't follow research on a day-to-day basis,
Right.
you might find it a little bit onerous, abstract, and it may sound like you don't get it.
Yeah.
So this is nothing to do with language, okay? This is even just the subject itself.
Okay.
That's point number one. Point number two, exploring IKS using scientific tools that we have and using our Macaulayite education is a challenge, and this is really started in the last 10, 20, 30 years in a big way. And now actually with the new education policy, the last 5, 6 years. So everything that is being presented, not everything is really original or fully complete. People may be giving you their opinions rather than telling you the results of research. And they may be contradictory to other people's views. Again, opinion may be mixed with actual research results. Because these are, mind is not something that is easily described. It is not a physical thing that you can see, even though it's in the physical realm, we all know. So it needs models, it needs definitions, and different schools of thought define it differently. So we need to be aware of these kind of nuances to be able to even understand and appreciate if what is being talked about makes sense in an objective way, not necessarily to you or not due to your limitation, just looking as an observer. So some of it could be that one is not prepared in the field. Like you never really studied about mind, let us say.
Right.
You will find this whole thing very, very heavy.
Yes.
So that is point number two. Now regarding the IKS itself, Indian knowledge systems, almost all of Indian knowledge systems is in Sanskrit.
Okay.
Okay, if you take Sanskritam, only about 5%, maybe less than that, is scriptures. 95% is either plays or songs or in science and musings on philosophies, all those kinds of things. So it is a very vast literature that we have. So Indian knowledge systems, by definition, I would say vast majority of it across the board is in Sanskritam.
Yes.
So the German scholars and the British scholars, and I would like to say scholars in quotation because in the last century and a half, they kind of studied the Vedas, they translated it, they created, the Moni Williams dictionary and so on. I, kudos to them for the effort,
Right.
but they were not completely apprised of the cultural ethos here to be able to fully appreciate all the nuances, to put it very mildly. Further, in many cases, for example, the Vedas, they were interpreted in a very rudimentary way in order to actually criticize it.
Okay.
This is a part of the colonial agenda. If you look at the Oxford chair that was occupied by Max Muller, it was specifically mentioned that this is to promote the colonial, promote the empire, basically, empire's primacy. So much of that is motivated work.
Okay.
The reason why knowing Sanskritam is essential is, see, you read Sanskritam, you read a scripture, okay, you give an interpretation based upon the literal meanings. But you have no knowledge at all about, let's say, the philosophical aspect of it or the spiritual aspect of it. Your reading will be limited by the lack of that knowledge. And
Right.
suppose I rely on that, I am again limited by that. So either I work with scholars who are not only scholars in Sanskritam but also in philosophies, etc. So that they can unearth the right meanings that is specific to the context. Because the same word can mean different things in different contexts. Suppose I say dark. It can mean the light, the actual lack of light, or it can mean the color of something, or it can be a metaphor, or it can be something really profound which is yet to be unearthed. I've just given you some examples like
Right.
this.
Right.
But suppose I want to portray a work in a bad light, I would pick the least common denominator, and like New York Times does, for example, right now, or Washington Post about India. If you read about those kind of posts, you'd think that India is like the worst place on earth. But you and I even know it's not true.
Right.
So relying on others' interpretation, I think, is really not a great way to explore Indian knowledge systems. So either one educates oneself to know Sanskritam, working in Sanskritam, it's not difficult actually.
Okay.
It's a very easy language to learn.
Okay.
It needs some effort, of course, and you do that and then work with the people who know deeper knowledge in the field of Indian knowledge systems. There are many. There are several scholars, and then you work with them, or you yourself become one of those scholars and explore. So those options are, I think, much better than taking a translation from somewhere. So work with a scholar, make it a live dialogue, so that you can actually question, what do you mean by this? What do you mean by that? Because most slokas and most even non-scriptures, they can be layered meanings. So in jokes, for example, or in
Yes.
puns, I may use the word, but I may imply two different things depending on the context. That's why it's funny,
Yes. Yes.
right? So meaning can be in layers, and you may see only the outermost layer. But then, if you have the trigger and have the right preparation, you'll be able to see the next layer and the next layer, and so it is an unfolding. And these are all encrypted because they can stay safe. And that is why ours is an oral tradition, not an oral tradition. Oral tradition. सुन के हम सीखते हैं. Yeah.
Okay.
Actually, Shruti and Smriti, but that is actually, Shruti means Vedas.
Okay.
Smriti is actually the secular laws, which can change. Shruti is permanent.
Okay.
Now, what I'm saying is the way our knowledge system has been passed down
Is oral.
is orally. Oral and oral. Oral is listening.
Acha. Okay.
Oral.
Oral?
Yeah, oral, okay. And
Okay.
so, so the meanings, if I know, I may actually distort. There's a possibility. But a person who's prepared to receive the meaning is unlikely to distort. Right? So that is why it's encrypted. So that you think it's just a thing and just keep repeating the shloka or the word. So the point is, I think working with Sanskritam is important. If you are really wanting to do original research of any treatise, or you want to test a hypothesis of if mantras work, you can make up some jumble with Sanskritam, like syllables, for example, and take a mantra and see if it makes a difference. Or take mantra with meaning, without meaning. All these things can be explored. So I would say it is quite central. But in cases where one doesn't know, one can work with scholars. In fact, at IIT Mandi, there's a MOU that is signed between Central Sanskritam University and IIT Mandi. So there's going to be a exchange of scholars and there's going to be collaboration. And this is absolutely important. In the same vein, I must also tell you that if you're doing Indian knowledge systems, let's say you're doing yoga, if you're doing Ayurveda, you need to know the system. You need to be, a practitioner. It would help a great deal if you are, because then you have first-hand experience of something that you care about. It's not like, at least if you do yoga, it is not just exercise. Again, right? It is much more than that.
Right.
If it is just exercise, what's the big deal? Because it can give wellness at many levels, regarding breathing and regarding postures, regarding keeping the eyes closed or keeping the eyes half closed sometimes. There are so many different kinds of situations, rules for different asanas and all that. So these are not devised very flippantly by our ancestors. These are devised with a great deal of thought. How am I able to say this? Because I have personal experience in doing this. But that doesn't mean that everything that I say on yoga is correct. But I will at least have, if I am a practitioner, I will approach it with some reverence to give it the benefit of the doubt, to allow me or allow the experimenter or the investigator to reveal the truths that we can reveal. Otherwise, you'll say, it's just exercise. It's just like Tai Chi, or it's just like running. It doesn't matter. We kind of make these statements flippantly because of a preconception that is just exercise.
Right.
So, knowing and practicing the Indian systems, I think, is of great help. I must say that, however, one shouldn't be so wedded to it that one ignores an objective result.
Right.
So
Absolutely.
because these processes are quite complex, and they may have in them redundant things that have no meaning. See, if you have water, can you just have water? Water needs a container. Container is as important because that is what carries the water. But really, you are having the water, but the container is necessary, and you need a good clean container. So that packaging is also a part of the system. So what is packaging and what is not is very interwoven and encrypted. So we need to actually, that's how nature is. That's how the universe is. Universe doesn't say, okay, this law is followed here. It is just the way it is. We are the humans trying to unlock this. I don't know if I have addressed some of your questions.
See, one is the category of the people who would like to deep delve into Vedas. And for them, as per what I get, the learning Sanskrit is one thing, but interpreting it in a way without having context, it won't be possible. For that, I would be needing a guru.
Absolutely. Because actually, let me just comment on this right away.
Yes.
Because learning Sanskritam doesn't automatically make you qualified to read the Veda. You need a guru for the Veda. One is because there are chants, these are mantras, there are intonations involved, both for retention purposes and also for meanings. Meanings can be altered, context can be altered. And I talked about layered meanings, correct?
Right.
If you just sit with a dictionary, Sanskrit dictionary, you will come up with a completely wrong idea. I mean, one example is that people quote that, Rig Veda says that you can eat beef. it's completely false. And this has been proved actually by many scholars.
Okay.
You can see it on Twitter and X and so on.
Okay.
They actually have taken it apart. They say, which shloka? Let us take it apart. Well, this doesn't mean this. This doesn't mean this. This actually means this. This means this. And they can technically take it apart and do it because they have the depth to do it. They've also thought about this in a deeper way, probably with a guru, to look at all possible things. Suppose you have 3-4 different meanings that come out. Which is the meaning that is meant over there?
Yes.
Is a valid question.
Yes.
So then you take context. Okay? Because otherwise you can make anything mean anything. So, as you rightly pointed out, you just knowing Sanskritam is one necessary condition, not sufficient. And if you're looking at Vedas, you need to learn it from Veda Pathshala. It takes a few years to learn this. And then you need to go with a person who has studied this for years. I mean, as you would go for any science or any subject, you go with a professor who has studied this for many years. Not everything that they say may be right, but overall picture that they are conveying will give you good insights. And I'm saying this carefully because professors, outside the system, academics outside the system, can be very hostile. Indian knowledge has been approached in a very hostile way by the Europeans and the Americans. And of course, the Indian academia was completely destroyed in the last few hundred years. So many of the things that we are dealing with is a result of this problem. Somebody else setting the agenda, telling us what the Vedas say. For example, dark skin and light skinned people. There's no such thing. This was the thinking of the colonizers because they were white skinned and the colonized were the dark skin. So that they are projecting onto the Vedas, which is their interpretation.
Right.
And no Bhashyakara, no scholar of Veda in the tradition ever means that. So this is an example.
I get it. They might be a lot hostile to our Vedas and to our ancient wisdom, but this is the first job that Westerners did to us, that they disconnected us from them, disconnected us from the Vedas by deracinating us, by disconnecting us with the root language, that is Sanskrit.
Right.
So if they are so hostile to it, then why did they do that?
Right.
It means they saw something in our ancient wisdom.
Correct. Actually, so there are many aspects to it. Europe in the 1800s were asking this question: where did they come from? Where did the people come from?
Yeah.
So especially in Germany, and because they were made of many principalities and so on. And when one of the English judges, I think his name is William Jones, if I remember correctly, he came to Calcutta. Kolkata now, it's Calcutta in those days. He was a judge. He knew 27 languages. So he was the first to notice that Bengali was very similar to German. Okay, in fact, they say Bahan and Autobahn. It's the same, almost same word. It comes from Vahan. So he was the first to make the connection between the Indian languages being very similar to the European languages. That's one thing. So then they said, oh, this is vast literature that is there, in India. So we need to, look at what it is. Okay, so as they were trying to discover where they were from, etc., and they saw this huge body of literature,
Right.
which is pretty much not available anywhere else if you look at it carefully. And then they started looking at that. And I don't want to completely say that they were completely motivated. They actually put in a lot of effort to do this, but definitely they were looking with an outsider looking in lens. Okay, and that is not a bad thing necessarily, but in a profound subject, you need to know many aspects of what you're trying to study before you study it. Otherwise, you'll come up with something that's not very authentic or meaningful. I mean, all this has been, and whatever I'm saying is not new. It has been actually shown. Max Muller, people say, he was a great sage and this and that. But there have been books on how Max Muller actually was very devious in terms of projecting. He never traveled to India, for example. How will he know the Indian ethos? Impossible. How will he know the concept of a rishi? impossible, right? You know, for example, you have this Audrey Truschke and I forget, there's another professor in University of Chicago uh, who writes about Ramakrishna Paramahamsa and Vivekananda, and without realizing the spiritual, nature of their endeavors, which was to transcend, beyond the physical. They say that it was a gay club. I mean, so you come up with all these kinds of weird, and this is what I mean by hostile.
Okay.
Maybe they're not hostile, but they are just misinformed. Let's say, if I want to be very charitable. So, but answer is yes. I think they did see, and they were quite astonished
Yes.
when they saw that. In fact, I think Macaulay's note says that Indian society was actually quite good, and that's because everybody was doing what they were supposed to. So, their idea was to make the Indians essentially think that there is something else that is better, and what they have is not that good.
Right.
So the way they did this is they just stopped supporting the Sanskrit Vidyalayas. They, of course, they, economics was eroded within 35 years. 1800 to 1835, it had gone from 27% GDP to about 3 or 4% GDP of the world. Now you cut off the lifeline for these institutions, they will actually decline. In the meanwhile, now people have to make money, so you say, oh, English is wonderful, and there are statements made like, oh, whatever is written in all the Indian books, you can capture it, in the first few grades that are taught in England. Those kind of disparaging statements were made. So, and of course, people wanted to make a living. They were, they had to learn English, and so many factors like this were at play. That is what was the beginning of this. So, I mean, over 150 years, it's not even really 200 years. It's about, it will be 200 years in another 10 years
Now
or
you
so.
cut the roots of civilization. See the rate at which it
Correct.
will have downfallen.
Correct.
Right.
And but I must say that has worked only so much. It has caused great damage, but India is back up right now, right? And Europe is down. In fact, the predictions are that Europe is not going to go up again because the loot has run out. Essentially, effect of the loot has run out. So the point is that India to change is not very easy. India is a very vast country where everybody is a practitioner. So while it affected across the board because of economics and because of these deracination, as you mentioned, India still lives because the Indian culture and the knowledge system is living.
It's resilience.
It is resilience and commitment of our ancestors, actually, really. So if we take Sanskritam, that is how it went into decline. In 1800, it was very normal for people to learn Sanskritam. Even my grandfather was learning Sanskritam. He was born in the early part of 1900s. It was normal to speak in Sanskritam. Okay, when we think, and so our Indian government after independence did the worst thing. They actually did worse than what the British did. In terms of they started propagating the myth that Sanskrit is a dead language. That's not true at all. It's a live language. In fact, you ask the Shankaracharya of Sringeri, he says those who say it's a dead language do not know anything about what a language is. It's a living language. You can learn this in a few days, and of course, you learn for about 2-3 months, you'll be able to make conversation, no problem.
Okay.
It is a living language, and the Renaissance is going to be driven by Sanskritam in many ways.
You think in future?
It's happening right now. In fact, in America itself, there's a large number of people who are speaking Sanskritam. There's a program there known as SAFL, Sanskritam as a Foreign Language, SAFL, which are taught in for credit in high school students to high school students, and
But one thing I have in my mind, that for Westerners, since they have digested our knowledge since they have come up with alternative names like sustainable development and all, so it is easy for them to discredit our ancient wisdom with ease now, because they said we already have this thing. Like,
Right.
so what's the big deal? What's the new that your ancient thing is coming up with?
Right.
So and since I'm conditioned in this Western framework of knowledge, so my instinct is also to go for ecological development, sustainable development. I have started thinking in that way.
Right. Actually, what does sustainable development mean? This is not new.
Huh.
Dharati iti dharma.
Huh.
Dharma means that which supports and that which sustains. That is the definition of dharma.
Huh. Okay.
So the sustainability thing is actually a small aspect of what we have been doing it for millennia. Now, one point I want to address first. You said Westerners may discredit us.
Huh.
Let them. It's okay. Doesn't matter.
But for even us,
Hmm.
since I already have a term for it, so for most of us, we are not able to appreciate that what's the new our ancient wisdom is offering.
Right. Actually, if you take farming, for example,
Huh.
now they're doing organic farming as though
Yeah.
that's been a new invention.
Yeah, exactly.
This is what has been done for millennia.
Huh.
So this, once you are awakened to this reality,
Hmm.
you will know what is reality. So you will ignore
Hmm.
this kind of thing. Oh, this organic is new and blah blah blah.
Huh.
See, to shift back to organic is a challenge because the fertilizer companies will not allow it.
Right.
Right? I mean, we are so invested in the last 75 years into this,
Hmm.
and we were kind of, as we were trying to find our way of building a nation and so on, these things were forced upon us in many ways. This again is because of our thought. We had been dumbed down to
Yes.
think that we don't know, always the foreigners know better. So this IKS awakening,
Huh.
I think one of the things that it should do and it will do is, even for the layperson, so let's say you and me,
Yes.
we will actually know that no, this is what is the truth.
Huh.
That is their interpretation, they can say it.
Hmm.
For example, like in Operation Sindoor,
Huh. Yes.
right? The claim that Trump made, that he made a rapprochement,
Yeah.
we all know it is bullshit.
Yes.
You can talk. So the joke is on him. Correct?
Yeah.
So you won't say, now I'm going to follow, wo keh raha to kuch hoga. If you think like that, that means you're deeply colonized and you're so much suspicious about your own government, your own civilization, your own army. That needs, introspection and change. And this has to be at the individual level, ultimately. There's no such thing called society. It's like each one of us has to awaken. Awakening cannot be outsourced. It cannot be delegated.
It has to be
We have to have
oneself.
each one. So if it happens to me,
Huh.
maybe people around me I may be able to influence, perhaps, or not. So, but it starts with one person and ends with one person, really, and we all have to do it. And what you say is about very thought that the Westerners may say this, they may discredit us. They will. They definitely will. The more the truths we bring out, the more they will discredit, because they cannot stand it.
The
that-
whole structure will be shaken.
no, they cannot stand it that India is rising and rising above them. So it is a simple question of jealousy and simple question of we want to have you under us.
Right, right.
So it is precisely for that reason this needs to come out. It is not for establishing that our system is the best. Maybe it's not, but it is our system. Let us learn what is the right things there, what is the not so right things there, what is truth, what is falsehood. We should find out, right? Just like in each of us, we need to know when we are telling the truth, when we are not telling the truth. Whether others believe it or not is a different matter.
Right, right.
We should be at least aware of this.
Huh.
So-
And that's the true journey of dharma, seeking.
Correct. And this IKEA's exploration is an collective exploration. That's all. We have inner exploration for individually, and we can do this as a family. We can do this as a community. That is how you have Kula, See, nowadays, the word caste is used. Caste, there's no such thing as caste, really. This is the invention of the British using a Portuguese word, and this happened in the 1880s. Before that, it was never used at all. So we have this kula, jati, gotra, all these things we have. There's no such thing as caste, right? What is kula? And what is jati? And what is gotra? Gotra is family. Okay, kula is like an entire, like a lineage or community. And you can say jati, it can be a guild.
Okay.
For example, ones who are cobblers. So that is that. Ones
Trade
it's a trade aspect. So it is, right now we go to conferences, right? For example, you're a publisher. So I'm sure you go to conferences where publishers meet. And they talk about what are the various different things, how publishers go through this up and downs, what are the strategies for this, you exchange ideas, just like in this conference, how we exchange ideas.
Right.
And they will build, for example, if they're real estate agents or IATA agents, for travel agents, there are a bunch of common problems. If their businesses go down because of some downturn, they'll have strategies to support each other, collectively.
Right.
So it is a social net that protects everybody, and that is an inherent aspect of our community, our civilization. Yes, it has been abused, no question about it. It has been abused maybe in the last several hundred years, but the question is, how much was it abuse? Is it 95% abuse, 99% abuse, or is it 5% abuse? So that is the question, really. That needs exploration. For example, blaming one community or the other, saying that they were responsible for this, is absolute nonsense.
Lead us nowhere.
It not only doesn't lead us anywhere, no, if it is the truth, let it be established. But it is based on very flimsy parroting of lines, by certain ecosystems like the Marxists. So these need scrutiny. These need to be challenged. Challenge needs research, and the research needs to be based upon the right methods, the right rigor, so that they're countered. I'm not saying that the left is wrong or the right is right or the other way around. Maybe they have good things in both. Maybe the right propagates, they also have propaganda. So these need to be challenged constantly. It's not like you settle a matter and you just move on. This is something that happens all the time.
Right.
Because we are 1.4 billion people, what do you expect? Right?
So, do you think we as a civilization would be able to appreciate our collective identity more if all of us learn Sanskrit at a basic level?
I think all of us should know our mother tongue very well.
Okay.
Sanskritam, definitely.
Okay.
I think Sanskritam should be made the communication language across India. It is total bullshit to think that English is the only communication language. What happened before the British came? We didn't communicate with each other or what? I think we all communicate quite well.
Right.
I mean, Krishna was born in the North India, but there are bhaktas and all over the place.
Exactly.
It is not like Krishna bhaktas were around only Vrindavan and Mathura, correct?
Yes.
And in all languages there are compositions.
Right.
And so this is true for every tradition. It is like a cloud technology. Something nice happens in one area. Okay, then to transmit it, you upload it and then take it in Sanskritam and then you download it again in different languages. You can look at it that way. So Sanskritam, I think, is essential. Knowing the mother tongue is essential. So you're rooted.
Okay.
I think also learning science should happen in the mother tongue. This is something that did not happen for me. And I can tell you that the people who learn subjects in their mother tongue, they're able to relate to the subject through words that are familiar to them.
Right.
I'll tell you my example. Okay? Force equals m times a. Force. What is force? I mean, it's not in my daily, discourse. or mass, you have to define the thing. Acceleration, you have to define the thing. But if you define this in, let's say, in Hindi or in Tamil, which I do not know the definition of, unfortunately,
Yeah, it's.
but
Huh.
I had to, like, take it for as it is, and then kind of takes me a while to appreciate what it is.
Huh.
But I had a postdoc. I've had students who had learned physics
Okay.
in their mother tongue.
Acha.
Their, feel for the concepts was much more natural.
You see the difference?
I've seen it.
Okay.
I must say that I have not done a study on this.
Huh.
But I think there is, if I learn something in Sanskritam or in Tamil,
Huh.
it is quite different from what I learn in English
Okay.
because of the familiarity.
Right.
For example, now if you say yajna, and if you say ahuti,
Huh.
if you say yajamana,
Huh.
I can tell you that there is really no way you can translate that to English without losing out on what it is.
Right. But the problem that is happening is even my mother tongue is getting corrupted. Yeah. So even I will prefer, if I have to read two texts, I would prefer to read in English rather than Hindi. So this happens when your mother tongue itself is getting corrupted.
So I don't know if corruption is the right word. Maybe it's getting mixed up.
Yes,
Okay, let's say with English.
Yeah.
This is a phenomenon that's happening all over the place,
Right.
and I would say it is happening a lot with Tamil,
Okay.
and in many languages. So the way around it is, it's not that you don't speak that; you can speak that too.
Yes.
But you can also make a conscious effort to communicate in your mother tongue without that. It's kind of a fun game.
No, but learning subjects in mother tongue, about that aspect I was talking
No,
about.
if it is taught in schools, you will learn it. You will learn it. Actually, what I find something very positive, I must tell you, in the last few years, if I look at the announcements in the airports or in the railway stations, the Hindi announcements are so much closer to Sanskritam that even if you don't know Hindi, I happen to know both languages, but I know for a fact some people who knew Sanskritam but didn't know Hindi, they were able to follow it.
That's great.
So there is a,
So much overlap.
and so keeping the languages the way they are. See, they will evolve on their own.
Right.
They'll be mixing with English, yes,
Right.
but it shouldn't go to ridiculous extents. Like, if you have a sentence with 7 words, 5 words are English,
Right.
then that is not your mother tongue.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I want to understand a few more things. Sanskrit is called the language of divinity as well as the language of future, which will be used in machine learning and all. So I want to understand what is great and unique about Sanskrit that other languages do not have.
See, Sanskrit is known as Deva Bhasha. I'll tell you what is unique about Sanskrit. It's a very ancient tongue, and it is one of the most scientific in terms of the sound systems. In fact, ka kha ga ga na, cha cha ja ja na, right? What is the next?
Ta ta da da na.
Ta tha da da na.
Ha.
Actually, it's ta tha da da na, then ta tha da da na,
Right.
then it's pa pa ba ba ma. So ka comes from here, pa ends up here. Everything is in between. So it actually is a journey from here to here. It's all very scientifically organized. Ka kha
Okay.
ka kha ga ga na. So the Panini
Acha.
organized this. So
Ka kha ga ga
it's known as a
here.
guttural, yeah.
And the last line is here.
The pa pa ba ba ma lips, no.
Okay,
Labial.
okay.
So
Acha.
so it is very scientifically organized. Okay, that is number one.
Okay.
Number two.
Huh.
So the words in Sanskritam, they come naturally out of the sounds, and even you can have a single letter which has a meaning. For example, if I say the means it has something. I'm telling you one example. It would be associated with something that gives, so giving, especially if it's in the end. So suppose I say Neerada, something that gives water. Neera is water. Neerada, so something that gives water. So Neerada could mean a cloud,
Okay.
for example.
Acha.
Or Neerada, it can be some other thing that is giving you water. I can name that. So I just made up. I can figure out what the meaning is, right? Just with simple sounds. It's very intuitive. That's number one.
Okay.
Number two, it is organized very beautifully, and this was done by by Panini, and there's a treatise known as Ashtadhyayi, which has 8 different chapters
Okay.
which describes everything about Sanskritam. How, there are little over 2000 dhatus. All words come from that. How would you get the, make a word? I can make a word, no problem. And if there is a word, you can decode it and figure out what the meaning is. You don't need a dictionary if you get
Okay.
adept at it. In fact,
Acha.
a Sanskritam scholar
Huh.
can get away with you not using the dictionary or using minimally,
Acha.
because you learn how the words work.
Okay.
There is a way the words work, the way
Acha.
the sounds work.
Okay.
You understand?
So if you have that knowledge or that fundamentals,
Yes.
you can play it.
You can. Of course, I'm not saying that everybody who learns Sanskritam will be able to figure it out. That is not the idea.
Right.
It is used for formal communication. It is used for also, playwriting and all of that. Okay,
Yes.
all that is good.
Yes.
But if you go deep enough, you can actually, it will reveal to you many things. You can see how it kind of works,
Acha.
and
That's beautiful.
that is very unusual for a language.
Okay.
Okay, and I wouldn't claim that is the only language that will do that, but this language definitely does it.
Okay.
You
That's
know,
our language.
and it's ours. It's definitely ours.
Huh.
And Sanskritam, it is from there that all the other languages are borrowed. If you look at it,
Huh.
so if you say, in German, Bahn, I say, it's Bahn. Bahn means Autobahn. You have heard of it, right?
Yeah.
Bahn means actually it comes from Vahan.
Vahan.
Okay.
Right.
I mean culture. It's
Yes.
कलाचार है. कलाचार कला का आचार. कला का आचरण करते हैं
culture.
culture. For example,
Okay.
tumul.
Okay.
Tumult. The word tumult.
Huh.
Tumulam. So it gives loud sound. So many roots of even English words are actually from Sanskritam.
Okay.
Okay, and this you will know. You don't need anybody to tell you. If you know and you look, you will be able to see this. But you don't need to prove that this came from this and that, unless that you can leave it to the
Academic
linguist.
debate. Huh.
But you can see and you can connect,
Huh.
so you can speak better English. You can speak many Indian tongues. You'll be able to understand many things, and you'll be able to understand deeper meanings of different things. Or when a word is there, you can figure out different meanings of the same thing.
Right.
Right?
That's the beauty of it.
Yes. So Deva Bhasha means it's a near perfect tongue, because Panini's grammar is the only treatise
Okay.
which describes all the rules within the language in a self-consistent way. So this is basically how computers work, right?
Self-consistent way. What does
Means
it mean?
there are a bunch of rules, but no rule contradicts other,
Okay.
and it's 8 volumes. Okay, it's a huge treatise.
Okay.
Okay, and this was a compilation by Panini of languages, Sanskritam, that already existed, and he looked at the different features and organized it. I mean, that is scholarship, really. Okay, and there's no other language that has it. No other language that I know of that has such a thing. Now, you said about it's possible using computers. So I'm not a computers expert, but I would think that when it is so precisely organized, it will be useful. But I must tell you that there are claims made, like NASA is using this and it's going to be good for machine learning. I haven't seen the evidence for it, at least in the popular literature. I do not know about the academic literature, but we need to be careful to make the right claims and avoid making wrong claims, because those actually give they're bad taste, number one,
Right.
and those give a reason for criticism, which is not needed,
Yes.
and that detract from the true greatness of the language. Why should we claim something that is not true?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You would do that only if you don't know the beauty in what is already there.
What is already there? One last question.
Okay.
In Sanskrit, why is there a focus too much on it has to be said with the right phonetic, right swar, right. But it has to be said it in the right way, only then the effect will come.
Right.
Why?
Right. The thing is, in Sanskritam, you have you're exercising different parts of your breathing system. Let me put it the non-technical way. Okay.
Okay.
So it is a natural way when you speak in Sanskritam. you're using the tongue, you're using the voice, using the nose in a way that is actually therapeutic to you, number one. Okay. Number two, small changes in the pronunciation can bring about large changes in the meaning. For example,
Okay.
you know Kumbhakarna?
Yes.
You know where he lives? Okay, so Kumbhakarna, you know, I won't tell you the whole story.
Huh.
He wanted to get a boon
Hmm.
which basically destroyed all the devatas.
Okay.
So that, you know, he can do what he wants. Okay, so asuras usually do that. So he did a lot of tapas, and so he was about to say Nirdaivata.
Okay.
Nirdevata.
Okay.
But the devatas had anticipated this.
Okay.
So when he was about to say this, Saraswati sits in his tongue. So he says Nidra Eva.
Acha.
Instead of Nirde,
Huh.
he says Nidra.
Okay.
So instead of saying Nirdevata, he's saying Nidra.
Huh.
So that's why he gets basically that he is sleeping all the time. Nidra is to sleep.
Yeah.
So meanings can change tremendously. See,
Okay.
Brahma
Huh.
is, you know, Brahma.
Huh. Yeah.
Brahman is Brahman. I won't describe the meaning.
Yes.
But what is Brahma? Brahma means actually confusion,
The Brahma means confusion.
right? Brahma ho gaya, no?
Brahm. Okay.
Brahm, right?
Yeah.
So how you pronounce
Huh.
can completely change the meaning.
Right.
You understand?
Huh.
So you say, that's why the Alpa Prana Mahaprana are important. You don't say Bhaskar, you say Bhaskar, Bhati. Okay, and these aspects are there even in English actually, but you know here it is very important because it changes the meaning completely.
Okay. Huh.
Okay, so pronouncing is important to get the right word out so that the right meaning is conveyed. Because the idea of talking is to convey a meaning.
Right.
If you say, for example, you have say in the northern part of India, suppose I will say Gauri. You don't say Gauri, you'll say Gauri. Gauri.
Yeah.
But then you're ignoring, see, Gauri will be just O.
Yeah.
Gau has two.
Two. Right.
So you're losing out, you're kind of diminishing the language. If you just, you know, over a period of time, you won't be able to even pronounce Gau. You understand what I'm saying?
Right.
So Gau Mata, you'll say Gau Mata. You'll say Gau Mata. So that's correct in Hindi, but not correct in Sanskrit.
In English, I'm making pronunciations all the time wrong.
That's okay. English is not their bhasha, so you're okay.
हाँ ठीक है
But Sanskritam,
हाँ
it can change the meaning without your knowledge.
ठीक है
Okay, and it can convey the opposite meaning. Even in English, it can happen actually. You know, in for example, in law and all, it's very important. Not so much the pronunciation, but it's about the how you use it. It's the same
to
idea.
get the full effectiveness for the mantras and shlokas.
For the mantras, absolutely, there's no question. So you know, in even normal conversation, you need to do it. Only if you do it in normal conversation, will you be able to do it in mantra.
Right.
Okay.
Huh.
So in mantra, you not only have the pronunciation, but you also have the intonations. So Om Tyambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushtivardhanam Urvarukamiva Bandhanan Mrityor Muktiyamamritat. This is actually the Mahamrityunjaya mantra.
Okay.
So you can see da 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 da. So there is actually there's intonations.
Yes.
That intonation has to be correct.
Okay.
If it is not,
हाँ
it will be discordant and it will not be a mantra. A mantra is a consecrated sound. What does the consecration, where does the consecration come from? It comes from the right pronunciation, it comes from the right timing of how you say it. You can't say Triambakam today and say Yajamahe tomorrow. You see what I'm saying?
timing, everything has to be
Everything.
right.
So it has to be the rhythm and the flow has to be right. So mantra is consecrated sound at one level. It has meaning. That is another layer. And the meanings have different layers. So you're talking about something that is extraordinary. It's not like somebody wrote some book. It is like somebody has composed this with 3-4 different layers, of which only the top layer is kind of apparent to you which looks very ordinary. So mantra is consecrated sound. So the consecration, where does it come from? It comes from the vision of one who has created it, and they have brought it from a place in a way that you have certain sounds that follow certain patterns and certain ups and downs that are easy to pronounce, and by doing that it takes you to a place. Your mind goes to a place. That's the effect of a mantra. And mantra can have many effects. Suppose I say, to look at the time, I don't look at any machine, and give the time. Is that true? No, you need to look at a watch.
Yeah.
Watch is meant for that. So
Yeah.
mantra is meant for specific things to be done in a specific way. Suppose I want to charge it, I'll just, you put a big battery on it. Can I charge it? I can't do that. I have to use the battery meant for it.
Right.
Because this gets consecrated only that way.
Right.
Or energized that way.
But if I have to put an analogy, if I speak the mantra the right way, only that I have fed the right password to log into the Wi-Fi.
You
of the
can say that.
Yeah.
And that is a necessary condition, not sufficient again.
Okay.
Many other things need to happen.
Okay.
So, so that is, you need to, because this needs attention. And also, you are able to use your tongue, your voice, your nose, your whole respiratory system in an optimal way. I mean, studies have been done, for example, if you do Vedocharan, like for example, Rudra, Chamaka, it gives you greater cognitive abilities, greater memory. People have shown this. It's not like, there's something in that sound, there's something in the intonation.
Right.
I don't follow the literature in that as to which is more important or if they have looked at that. But all of that is what is embedded. So these simple things are embedded in a beautiful way, and that is where the knowledge is.
So thank you, Mr. Ganapati ji. Thank you for a fascinating discussion that we had. I think going through this journey of learning Indian knowledge system is such an immersive experience that, I mean, you can't think of anything else. You'll be so much driven. You are just pulled into it. You're just sucked into it. Nobody needs to tell you that do this, do that. You're just so involved into it through your mind.
Right. Actually, the Indian knowledge systems really rests in the villages where in the day-to-day lives of people, they actually are immersed and they do it. They may not know why they are doing it or how it works, or maybe some people do. And that is the real way to be, honestly. Because something works, you just use it.
Do it.
But we are at a stage where, there's a significant number of people, especially the educated people, educated elite, who have done very well, made lots of money, been very successful, but they diss this. When I say diss this, I'm using this,
Right.
modern language, which is, they speak about it in a disparaging way, in a condescending way, in a hostile, negative way,
Right.
without knowing what it is. So let us explore it and see what it is.
Yes.
We'll find out what works and what doesn't.
Sure. And we are going to meet again in October in Kulhar Festival.
I'm not sure I'll be there, but maybe some other time.
Okay, but for sure we'll meet. Huh?
Sure. Wish
Thank
you all
you
the
so
best.
much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Namaste.
Namaste.